Today we're looking at a 3,000 square foot desert-inspired apartment in SoHo, New York City. This is a stunning place with a lot to see inside, and I'm going to tell you everything I like about it and what I don't like. Let's look at this apartment together. So as soon as you walk into this place, the first thing you see is a narrow hallway and a tall arched doorway made from reclaimed wood. It's a little dramatic, but it does give the entrance a specific mood that sticks with you throughout the entire place. And because the arch is so tall, you already notice the very high ceilings in here before you even get into the main room. But something to keep in mind is that because they're using reclaimed wood in the archway, it can warp with New York City's huge humidity swings because the summer is very humid and it's really dry in the winter. So if you're thinking about doing something similar in your own home, it's worth planning for how that wood will move over time. Now, you need to take a couple of steps up in order to reach the heart of the home, which is kind of an odd choice that surprises me a little bit. If they had to do it for structural reasons, for some reason the floor in one part of the apartment was higher than the floor in the other part, though that would be pretty rare, but I think it's actually just a stylistic choice for them. And if that's the case, then I don't really support it because you're giving up more than a foot of ceiling height here just for this feeling of entering a new space. And I think that's a bad call. But on your way to those stairs, you pass this nice little vanity, which is perfect if you're having people over and your guests just want to take a quick look at themselves before entering the main space. And I also love this planter here where they've got this tree growing right in the hallway. It's a great way to bring life into this corridor without it feeling forced. Now, the lime wash walls, which you see here in the entryway and all throughout the apartment, they really tie back to the Mediterranean and desert architecture, where these natural, breathable plasters help to regulate temperature and humidity and just keep everything comfortable in the home. But there's a problem here, because lime wash looks really good when it's new, but it also scuffs easily, especially in such a narrow corridor like this one, where this family's bags, jackets, and stroller is going to brush up against the wall and make it look pretty dire within 6 to 12 months. So just be cautious if you're using lime wash in really busy spaces like at your front door. Okay, so let's look at the living room now, where they've got these 3 massive windows, which apparently are 12 feet tall, and these beautiful soft linen curtains that run from the ceiling all the way down to the floor. But just to put this in perspective, if the windows themselves are 12 feet tall, then that means there's about another 3 feet below the windows and around another 3 feet above, which means this apartment has something like 18-foot ceilings. So it's absolutely enormous in here. In some parts of the world, they would absolutely split this into 2 separate levels. And so the fact that you've got all this incredible volume just really makes this space really spectacular to be in. But let's talk about furniture for a second. So they've got this really nice cozy sofa that looks so inviting to melt into, and they've also got this beautiful wooden coffee table sitting in front of it, which sits really low to the ground. And in fact, you'll notice that all the furniture in here is sitting really low, which keeps the sight lines open and doesn't block your view of the room at all. And that was a very smart choice. Now, in this corner by the window, they've got a wingback chair that looks just as comfortable and inviting as the couch. And they've also introduced some greenery to give the space a bit of life. And this ficus tree, with its super narrow trunk and the leaves just going in every direction, it's gonna move the light that comes in through those massive windows in a really pleasant and unpredictable way. But there are 2 things to keep in mind here. First, because these windows are so large, unless they're using triple paned glass, they're going to lose heat super fast in the winter. And because the curtains here are really light, they're not going to keep any heat in. So they do have radiators below the windows, but you may need to have those on almost the entire winter to keep this space warm, just because there's so much window. Now, I definitely wouldn't change that about the apartment, but it's just something you want to be aware of. And then related to that, if you've got those radiators on, then a large indoor tree like this one is going to tend to dry out pretty quickly when it's in a warm space. So you just want to be aware of that and keep an eye on a tree if it's in a spot like this, because it may need to move if it's getting too dry. But I also want to point out this really nice lamp next to this chair, which is super slim and super simple, but it's perfectly positioned so that anyone who's sitting there has all the light they need. Now, do you notice anything interesting about the furniture in this space? Check this out. None of it comes from the same set. I mean, they do have these 2 leather lounge chairs next to each other, and these are the same, but these are vintage pieces that aren't the same as the couch or the chair in the corner. That's just one of many elements of good design in this space, because the fact that all the furniture is different makes you way more curious about this room. Now, next to these chairs, they've got the 2 floating wooden shelves with just a few items on each, and I want you to notice how tastefully these are styled. They're the furthest thing from being overdone. And of course, using open shelving like this means that visual clutter can build up fast. So you don't just want to put all your random stuff on there and use these shelves as storage. Instead, you want to think of these as display units that are meant to look good, not to be your primary storage space. That should be somewhere else that is not on display. And I also love this little ledge that they've got underneath the TV, which they've built in rather than using a standalone console piece. It looks super classy, and they absolutely made the right choice there. But I also want to point out some of the decor items they've got here, particularly in these two photos of the coffee table and the shelves, because these are pieces rooted in primitive modernism, which is a design movement that started in the mid-20th century and was a bit of a blend between rugged handmade objects and more modern lines. And it's part of the reason that you see so many organic shapes and the heavy use of raw materials in mid-century furniture, because mid-century design took a lot of influence from primitive modernism, just like you see here. Now, next to the living room is the dining room, and it's all in the same big space, but the dining room is centered around this heavy table. You know, it's got thick stone legs and a nice wooden top, but because it's all light in color, it actually doesn't overwhelm the space. But you want to keep in mind that if you've got a table with so much weight to it like this one, you know, this probably weighs a few £100s because of these stone legs, it means that it's very difficult to move and nearly impossible if you live by yourself without completely scratching the floors. So changing the layout of this room is very tough. But how about these dining chairs they've got here? These are vintage 1960s oak chairs by Depoit, and so even though the setup here feels relaxed and really modern, they've injected this quiet layer of history into the space as well. But still, chairs like these, with tall carved backs, are not the most comfortable for long meals, so they're certainly beautiful to look at, but if you're going to be sitting in them for hours on end, then you may want to consider something a little bit more comfortable. Now, behind the dining table, they've got this massive wall of slatted wood doors running from the floor almost all the way to the ceiling, and these are actually hiding the room behind them, which is a study that converts into a guest bedroom, which I'll show you in a minute here. And then here, next to the dining table, is a full wall of open shelving filled with a mix of ceramics, small sculptures, and a couple of plants. And again, notice how the shelves aren't crowded and everything has room to breathe. This is not your primary storage space. This is art on display. Now, right next to the dining room is the kitchen, which creates a nice flow from space to space that's ideal for serving larger gatherings. And in the kitchen, they've got this big marble island that comfortably sits 5 people, which is perfect for breakfast or lunch. And they've also got these tall wooden stools that match the rest of the wood in the room. There's a waterfall edge on the island, and they use that same marble on the backsplash, which keeps the entire look of the kitchen cohesive. There's a really nice vintage European style stove with brass knobs and handles, and above it, they've got even more open shelving. Now, if you're using open shelving in this way in your kitchen, especially near the stove, everything on those shelves is going to get a little dirty and oily over time. So the open shelving certainly looks good, but you want to be thoughtful about what you put on there because it will get oily when it's so close to the stove. And then to the right of the stove, there's just a little bit more counter space that feels pretty warm and cozy because of all the natural elements here, with the wooden cutting boards and the ceramics on the shelves above. Now, I'm assuming they're keeping their real dishes that they use day to day probably in the drawers inside the island or next to the stove, because otherwise I just don't know where they're keeping their day-to-day stuff. I don't think they're using these dishes on the shelves here very frequently because those are just more difficult to eat with day to day, but somewhere in here they're storing all of their actual essentials. Okay, so I told you that behind the slatted doors in the dining room was a study, and this is what it looks like. It's a pretty cool design because when those slatted doors are open, the doors themselves disappear, as you can see on the left here, and so this room actually becomes part of the main space. But when they're closed, it becomes completely private. And because the doors apparently weigh 300 pounds each, you actually get a really solid distinction between the two rooms. Now, when the room is in study mode like it is now, you've got this really nice shelving unit here and a couple of chairs in front, which makes for a perfect reading nook. You know, kind of a little bit of a library vibe, but there's no real desk here, so you can't actually do much work, but it's still a great place to hang out if you want a little bit of separation from the main living room on the other side of the dining room. But the really cool thing here is that this shelving unit also hides a Murphy bed, and so when guests come over, you just take the decor off the shelves and fold down the unit to reveal a full bed. And so the room transitions from a study to a guest bedroom without any extra furniture. And I think this is just such a brilliant use of this space because otherwise, given the dimensions of this room, which are really only slightly wider than a bed, it could easily be wasted space or just kind of an extra zone next to the dining room. But they've managed to make it such a usable, flexible space, which is amazing. And given that this apartment only has one proper bedroom, this is a perfect way to accommodate guests. Now, speaking of the main bedroom, this is what it looks like here. And it's a little distinct from the rest of the apartment because it's darker, quieter, and it's got this cocoon sort of feeling. The walls are done in a deeper lime wash, and it makes the entire room feel wrapped and pretty calm. You've got some beautiful natural light coming in through the 2 big windows in the room, with sheer curtains for privacy during the day and heavier curtains for sleeping. And because the walls are even darker, the light feels that much softer. And personally, I love this wooden bench at the base of the bed. It's just such a great way to help you organize your clothes as you get dressed in the morning, because you can lay out a couple of outfits, or you can just put the items you're planning to wear on there before you get dressed. Now, next to the bed, they've got these small round night tables on either side that are kind of a piece of art on their own. You know, on this side, they've put a small ceramic vase with a single flower inside, which is kind of the only hint of color in this room. And they've also got these sleek, small wall sconces in a dark bronze finish that's gonna add some really nice warm light in the evenings. Then next to the window, we've got a similar wingback chair to the one in the living room, which creates another perfect spot to just kind of cozy up and spend some time in the afternoon when a ton of light is pouring through that window. Or it would also be super cozy in the evenings thanks to the lamp that's sitting right next to it. So overall, it's a beautifully executed bedroom. And because they've used a low bed, just like the low furniture through the rest of the home, it makes the ceilings feel even higher and just gives the room a ton of volume. Now, the apartment also has a nursery, so it's obviously a young family living here, but the palette of materials in the nursery is the same as the other main rooms in the home, which creates such a soft, calming experience for their child. They've got this tall wardrobe, which is the perfect place for storing diapers or the baby's clothes, and on the right side, they've got another dresser for even more storage. And again, this is not a large room. You know, from these photos, it looks like this room only has a curtain instead of a proper door, but because the ceilings are so high and they haven't stuffed this room with furniture, it still feels really spacious in here. Now, here in the main bathroom, you enter through another one of those tall arched doorways made from reclaimed wood. And the first thing I should mention is that they're using pocket doors on the bathroom, which is generally a bad idea because pocket doors don't seal as nicely as regular doors, and so sounds and smells are able to move through them more easily, which is not what you want from your primary bathroom, especially if your guests are using it when they come over. But as you enter, the star of the room is this beautiful freestanding stone tub with these incredibly tasteful brass fixtures. And this kind of a deep, rounded stone tub is really reminiscent of ancient desert water rituals, because you see similar carved basins in desert settlements like Petra or Wadi Rum in Jordan, where they really cherished the water and the process of bathing was slow and deliberate. So this just fits perfectly in the desert theme of this apartment. And there's also a large freestanding shower next to the tub with the same brass finishes. And then across the room is a massive dual vanity made from a huge slab of limestone with his and hers sinks. And personally, I just love the pendant light that's hanging down from the ceiling here, and I'm assuming there's another one on the other side of the vanity that we just can't see. And if we zoom out, you can see that they've got a shelf built right into the wall next to the tub, and a small stool where you can put your bath products or just take a rest while you're drying off. But one thing they should be aware of is they're using a wooden ceiling here above the shower and the bathtub, and that's a big moisture risk. It's beautiful for sure, but using wood in a high humidity zone requires very good ventilation, because even if you take a hot shower even just once or twice, and that moisture hits the ceiling and stays there, it can lead to warping, or at least darkening that wood over time. So I don't see any ventilation in this space as it is, but I really hope they've got a strong system in place to prevent that from happening. And then they've got another powder room for guests as well. And even though this one is small, I think it's beautifully executed. They use the same lime wash walls that they use throughout the rest of the apartment, and they've got this super cool mirror here that I absolutely love. And if you're wondering how you can make your bathroom just a little more interesting, then getting a mirror in a slightly different, organic kind of shape like you see here is an amazing way to do it. I'm not talking about some crazy shape that makes the mirror difficult to look at. I'm just talking about something a little different like this one, which is basically a rounded rectangle that's a bit wider at the top than it is at the bottom. Then they've gone with a vertical tile here in the shower and more brass finishes that just look so good, especially with how crisp that white tub is underneath. You know, the contrast here just looks incredible. But what's the thing that really catches your eye in here? It's this beautiful green on the vanity and the shower, right? And using green was such a good choice because this sort of green tone shows up in so many spa and wellness interiors because it just feels so soothing and relaxing. And so again, this is a pretty small detail, but it makes this room feel like a sanctuary. And then on the opposite wall, they've got the 4 floating wooden shelves for your bathroom essentials, and again, a small stool in case you just want to take a moment to relax in here. Now, Again, the wooden shelves may be liable to warping if they aren't well sealed, because a bathroom like this can get pretty steamy if there's not proper ventilation, but overall, I love this tiny space. So what can we learn from this home? First, they use the space brilliantly in here. Even though the apartment itself is 3,000 square feet, which is very large for a New York apartment, the primary bedroom, and guest bathroom are all pretty small, but they used every square inch of the apartment super well. Very well done. Second, make sure you're not placing form over function when you make design decisions. Personally, I think some of the choices in this apartment, like the styled shelves in the kitchen, the wooden ceiling in the primary bathroom, and maybe the step up to the living room, they might have been made more for aesthetics than for their usefulness, so just make sure that whatever changes you're making to your space are done for the right reasons. If you want to put looks first, you totally can, but just be aware of what you're doing when you do it. And third, they put together an incredible mood in this space. From the moment you step inside, you feel the desert chic vibe of the place. The colors all throughout the apartment, the carefully selected plants, and everything else in here has just been so well curated to give you a feeling that you can't get anywhere else in New York City. And for that, I applaud the designers who created this space. Very, very good job. So if you liked this video, I've linked to a few more in the description below, and you should definitely check out this video where I look at another gorgeous apartment that has the most unique kitchen island I've ever seen. I'll see you there.